All right, so today we're taking on a listener question. And honestly, I love this one. It's a
Yeah,
real head scratcher.
it is.
What if we took Diogenes of Sinope, the Cynic philosopher, the guy who lived in a pot?
Mm-hmm.
And what if we dropped him right into the 21st century and handed him an e-bike,
Oh,
an
wow.
electric bicycle?
Yeah,
Talk about a culture clash, right?
that's a good one.
So we dove deep into both Diogenes and the world of e-bikes. And
Mhm.
honestly, some surprising stuff came up.
Oh, absolutely.
Our mission today is to see where ancient philosophy and modern tech collide.
Okay.
And more importantly, what it tells us about our own lives and our own values in the here and now.
I like it.
So just to set the stage for folks who might not be as familiar with him,
Sure.
Diogenes was all about rejecting what he saw as the pointless conventions of society.
Yeah, he was really committed to living a simple life.
Yeah, he stripped everything down to the bare essentials.
Yeah.
And the Greeks had a word for this, ascesis,
Right.
and he was fiercely independent. He wanted to rely on himself for everything.
Yeah.
Autarky is self-sufficiency.
Exactly. And living in accordance with nature, cataphysin.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't afraid to use shamelessness to get his point across.
Oh, yeah, and idea, he'd do some pretty out-there stuff in public to make people think.
And for him, virtue was the only true good.
R.A.T.
Right. And he considered himself a citizen of the world, cosmopolites.
So not bound by any one place or culture.
Exactly. So this is a guy who famously lived in a ceramic jar,
Right.
And wandered around with a lamp in broad daylight, searching for an honest man.
It's hard to imagine someone like that navigating our modern world.
Yeah. So let's introduce the e-bike into the equation.
Right.
Now, Diogenes was all about owning as little as possible.
Minimalism to the extreme.
To the extreme, there's that famous story about him throwing away his bowl.
Oh, right, because he saw a child drinking water with just his cupped hands.
Right. So an e-bike with all its parts,
Yeah.
its cost, the need to charge it.
It seems like it would go against everything he stood for.
It does on the surface, right? But then
Yeah.
again,
Could it be a tool for a different kind of freedom?
oh, interesting.
Like freedom from relying on public transport or
Yeah.
having to be in a certain place at a certain time?
I see what you mean.
What do you think?
I think that's where the real tension lies. On the one hand, you've got this new technology with its own set of dependencies.
Right.
But if you strip it down to the most basic functional model,
Yeah.
maybe it could align with his desire for simplicity.
Yeah, and it raises a question for us too, doesn't it?
For sure.
Like, would Diogenes look at our smartphones, our laptops, all the apps we accumulate?
And all the stuff we store in the cloud.
Exactly. Would he see that as just another form of excess?
Another kind of clutter.
Yeah, digital clutter that distracts us from what's truly important.
It's a thought-provoking question, for sure.
Okay, so let's move on to another key Cynic principle, living in accordance with nature.
Right.
Diogenes had this deep admiration for animals, their straightforwardness.
Their lack of pretense.
Yeah, so how would he view an e-bike?
Well, on one hand, it is a relatively low-impact form of transportation.
Right, you're still pedaling.
Exactly. You're using your own power,
Yeah.
but then you've got the motor and the battery.
The artificial elements.
Yeah, the things that clearly distinguish it from something like riding a horse or walking.
So a bit of a conflict there.
Definitely. But imagine if the e-bike allowed Diogenes to access nature more easily, to escape the city faster and with less physical strain.
Okay, so it could actually help him live in closer alignment with nature in a way.
Potentially. I think it also highlights how technology has blurred the lines for us.
Between what's natural and what's not.
Exactly. Like, where do we draw the line these days?
All right, let's move on to the next big Cynic idea, shamelessness.
Okay.
Diogenes was notorious for his public stunts.
Oh, yeah, he'd do some pretty outrageous things.
Outrageous things to challenge social norms and make people think.
Right.
So picture this Diogenes rolling up on a beat-up old e-bike,
Okay.
maybe loaded with his meager possessions.
I can see.
And then he stops right in the middle of the street
Oh.
and launches into a philosophical rant about the absurdity of it all.
Now, that's a side I would love to see.
And I think it's important to remember that Diogenes wasn't just trying to be negative or cynical in the modern sense.
Right.
His goal was to make people examine their own lives.
To expose hypocrisy and challenge assumptions.
Exactly. So he might use a really basic e-bike, nothing fancy.
Yeah, just purely functional.
Yeah, to critique our obsession with status symbols and material possessions.
He'd be pointing out the absurdity of needing the latest and greatest e-bike model.
Exactly. He'd be asking us why we want what we want.
Forcing us to look deeper.
All right, so let's talk about virtue.
Okay.
This was the cornerstone of Diogenes' philosophy.
A right to the only true good?
Right. And for him, external things like wealth or possessions or status
None of that matter.
didn't matter at all. There's that famous story of Alexander the Great coming to meet Diogenes.
And Diogenes basically told him to get out of his sunlight.
Exactly. He wasn't impressed at all. So how would he view an e-bike in that context?
Well, I think it's safe to say he wouldn't be interested in it as a status symbol,
Definitely not.
but as a tool for living a virtuous life.
Hmm.
Maybe he could see some value there.
Okay, so it all comes down to function.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Would the e-bike help him live a simpler, more ethical life?
Like if it allowed him to travel, to share his philosophy with more people?
Or to access resources he needed for his basic existence?
Right. It's almost like a modern day version of the bowl.
I like that analogy.
You know, he threw away his bowl because he realized he didn't need it.
Right, he could drink water with his hands.
But if the e-bike served a genuine purpose in his pursuit of virtue,
He might begrudgingly accept it.
and I bet he'd opt for a used or repurposed e-bike.
Oh, absolutely, something that reflected his egalitarian spirit.
All right. So, and finally, we have to talk about Diogenes as a citizen of the world.
Okay.
He believed in a universal human community.
And he saw himself as a member of that community, not bound by any one place.
Exactly.
Mm.
So how would an e-bike fit into that worldview?
Well, I think it could actually enhance his ability to connect with people.
Yeah.
It could expand his horizons, allow him to travel further and faster.
To interact with diverse societies.
Right, he could travel to both urban and rural areas.
And spread his message even wider.
It's almost like the e-bike becomes a tool for promoting his cosmopolitan ideal.
It's like a platform for his philosophy on wheels.
I love it.
So imagine Diogenes cruising around on his e-bike.
Okay.
Maybe stopping to engage people in philosophical debate.
Or using the e-bike itself as a starting point for conversation.
Right, like pointing out the absurdity of traffic jams or, pollution from cars,
It's like he's become this watchdog of humanity.
but on two wheels.
Exactly.
So let's try to piece together what Diogenes' e-bike life might actually look like.
Okay.
I think it's safe to say he wouldn't buy a brand new top-of-the-line e-bike.
No way.
He'd probably find a used one.
Or even a discarded one that he could fix up himself.
Yeah, he'd be all about self-sufficiency, even with his e-bike.
For sure.
And he wouldn't use it for leisure or recreation.
No, he'd use it purely for practical purposes.
To get around.
To transport the essentials he needed for a simple life.
Right, and to engage in public discourse.
Of course.
And I bet he'd find creative ways to maintain and repair his e-bike himself.
Oh, absolutely. He'd be improvising, using whatever materials he could find.
And I think his social commentary would take on a whole new dimension with the e-bike.
Yeah, he'd be making witty remarks about people with their fancy e-bikes.
Right, or staging some kind of
Yeah.
symbolic protest.
Maybe he'd even attach a sign to his e-bike with some provocative philosophical statement.
I can totally see that. But even with the e-bike at his disposal,
Right.
I think he'd still prioritize a simple life lived outdoors.
Yeah, I don't think the e-bike would fundamentally change who he was.
Right, it would just be another tool in his arsenal.
A tool for living a virtuous life in accordance with nature and challenging the status quo.
So what can we take away from all of this?
Well, I think it makes us question our own relationship with technology.
Yeah.
Like, do we really need all the gadgets and devices that we have?
Are we using them to enhance our lives, or are they just another form of clutter?
Are we prioritizing function over status?
And are we really free, or have we just created new dependencies?
I think this whole thought experiment with Diogenes and the e-bike,
Yeah.
it challenges us to be more mindful consumers
To question norms and conventions.
and to consider what truly matters in life.
So here's the question we want to leave you with.
Right.
How does your own use of technology align with your values?
Are you truly free?
Or are you just creating new chains for yourself?
Think about it.